Hello everybody, my name is Andrei and today we're gonna have some fun in Android Studio using Kotlin. I'm very excited to host this webinar today, so let's take off and see what I have prepared for you. If you want to code in the same time with me, you can get the starter project from my GitHub. And the requirements are to have Android Studio installed and to have an Android emulator ready. So today we will create a mobile banking application that was a taste of how the final product will look like. Basically, the first screen of this application displays a list with the most recent transactions. Also, you can check your balance, and at the bottom of the screen you have a Go Premium button, which triggers the purchase flow of a subscription. And after this subscription is purchased, you will be redirected to the premium feature of this app, which displays statistics about your transactions. So let's jump to the implementation. In part 1 we will implement the transaction list. Basically we will trigger a mocked API to retrieve that transactions data, but in this journey we will use fragments, recycle views, adapters, retrofit 2 and Kotlin Coroutines. We will use live data, constraints layout. We will use MVVM and data classes. So the first thing we need to do in order to retrieve transactions is to define the networking component. In order to do that, we will create a package network. Inside this package, we will create a class that is named retro instance. Here we will define a companion object, and we will create a function get retro instance that will return our retrofit object. Return retrofit.builder, and we will pass the base URL from the network helper, and we will pass the converter factory. Okay, that's it. Next step is to define our retrofit interface. In order to do that, we will create a new Kotlin class that, as I said, it will be interface, and it will be called retro service. Here we will create a function get transactions from API. Because we want to use Kotlin Coroutines, this function needs to be a suspend function. And up here we need to put the get annotation and to pass our endpoint. Good. And this function, we will return a data model named transactions recycler list. Let's define it. Copy the name of this data class, and let's define a new package for models. And inside this package, let's create a new data class transactions recycle list. As I said, it's a data class. Here we define our transactions that will be kept in an array list of a new data transactions recycler data. And now let's define that. As we can see in our response, a transaction has a merchant, a created at field, an amount, and a type. All of them are strings. So let's define them. Merchant of type string, created at of type string. The next one is amount, and the last but not least, type. Good, looks good. And now we will need to import this. We are now done with the networking setup, so let's close these files and concentrate in the actual implementation of the transactions list. So we need here a container that will keep our fragment. So let's define it. We will use a linear layout. The height will be 0 dp because we want to use because we are using constraint layout. So let's define our constraints. The top of this container should be at the bottom of the transactions area. The start of this container should be at the start of its parent. The end of this container should be at the end of the parents. And the bottom of this container should be at the top of the Go Premium button. Looks good. And now we will give to it an ID, and we need also to define an orientation for it. The next thing we are going to do is to define a new package, fragment, and here to create a fragment for our transaction list. We will name it transactions list fragment. Good. This template has two parameters, but because we will not pass any parameter, we are deleting this piece of code. Now that we created this fragment, let's add it to our linear layout. So in order to do that, will create an instance of this fragment. Okay, we need to define a fragment manager instance. And we need to define a fragment transaction. Good. Now we need to add our fragment. So fragment transactions dot add in our layout. We will add our fragment. And the last part, we will need to commit this. Let's take this bunch of code and refactor it. We will extract a function and we will name it initialize transactions fragment. Good. Now I said that we will use MVVM, the model view model architecture. So in order to do that, we will create a new package, view model, and here we will create a new class, and we will name it transactions activity view model. This class inherits from view model, and we will define a variable. We will name it transaction list live data, which be a mutable live data object. Good. I think this will be latent variable. Good. And now we will make a init block where we will initialize this. In addition to this, we will create a function that retrieves our live data. We will name it get transactions list observer. This function, as I said, will return our live data. And now we will create a function that triggers the API. Here we will use Kotlin Coroutines, and we will create a retro instance. And then we will define our response. And we will pass this response in the pass value method of the transaction list live data object. Now that we are done with the implementation of the view model, let's go back to the fragment. Here we need to implement our recycle view. So let's delete this piece of code and add inside the frame layout a recycle view. We will give an ID, recycle view. Good, and now let's go to the class, to the fragment class, and let's initialize this recycle view. We will create a function, initialize recycle view, and we will pass here this view. We'll create our recycle view instance. From the view, we will find it by ID. It's a recycle view object, and its ID is recycle view. After this, we are setting up the linear layout manager, and we also need to set an adapter that we will build in a few moments. And I want to have a divider between the lines, so let's create it. Okay, and now let's add it to the recycle view. And now the only thing left is to set an adapter. Let's name this adapter transactions view adapter. Okay, and now let's define a new package for adapters. And inside this package, we will create the new class for adapter. And now, firstly, let's create a holder for this view adapter. So we will declare an inner class with the name transactions or view holder. This class inherits from recycle view holder. Good, and now the transaction view adapter will inherit from recycle view dot adapter, and here we will pass our transaction view adapter dot our holder. Good, and now we need to implement the missing methods. Nice. It looks like the view holder is expecting a parameter. It's expecting a view, so we will pass it. And now the error is gone. Moving forward, let's define our transactions. It will be an array list of, let's take a look to the model. Okay, so it will be an array list of transactions recycled data. We also need a function that notifies if dataset has changed, so let's create it. We will name it set updated data. We will pass the transactions, which are an array of transactions recycled data. We initialize the transactions, and we call notifies data set changed. I think this needs to be a var, not a val. Yes, and now we are good here. And let's implement the get item count now. This function returns the numbers of transactions. And now, before implementing the last two missing members, I would say to implement the view of a transaction's recycled data. So in order to do this, we will open the layout file and we will create a new XML. Let's name it item transactions. We will use constraint layout. The height of an item will be 40 scalable dp. And here we will have 3 text views. Let's give them some IDs. This will be a text view that will hold the merchant name. This will hold the amount, and this will hold the created at the date. Okay, and now because we are using constraint layout, we need to set some constraints. For consistency, we should add here also TV. And now let's put some constraints to these text views. We will start with the merchant text view. This should stay at the top in the top left corner of the view. So we will add two constraints. The top of this constraint, the top of this view should be constrained to the top of the parent, and the start of it to the start of the parent. Okay, we should add some margins, start and top. The text style should be bold, and the text size should be 12 scalable dp. Now let's enter a text in order to see what we have done. Okay, and I think we are good here. We continue now with the amount text view. This is kind of similar to the previous one, but instead of placing it in the left top corner, we want to place it in the right top corner. So constraint top to the top of the parent, and constraint end to the end of the parent. Now we also want to add some margins here, margin end and margin top. The text style also bold, the text size 12 scalable dp. And now let's enter some amount to see how it looks. Next text view that needs to be implemented, it's the date text view, which should be located here. So we will also use two constraints. The top of this view should have a constraint to the bottom of the amount text view, and the end to the end of the parent. The text size should be 12 scalable dp, and let's see it. I don't know, let's say 20 September 2021. Okay, looks very good. We are done here, and let's go back to our adapter. Okay, now let's finalize our holder. We will make 3 variables. Merchant text view equals view.find view by ID. It's of type text view. r.id.merchant text view. We import this, and we have 2 more text views. One of them is the amount text view, and the other one is the created at text view. Okay, and now let's create a function bind. Which will have a parameter, a transaction data, which is of type transaction or cycle data. Okay, and now we initialize the text view. So the merchant tv.text equals transaction data dot merchant. The amount text view dot text is equals to the transaction data dot amount, and the created at text view is initialized to the transaction data dot created at field. Good. Now we can implement the last part. So here on bind view holder, we will say holder that bind transactions dot get position. Good. And here on the create view holder, we will initialize view object equals to layout inflator from parent.context dot inflate, and here we will pass our view item transaction. We need to pass the parent and do not attach to it. Good, and now we will return the transaction view holder, and we will pass this view. Okay, we are nearly done. Now let's go back for a second in the transaction list fragment where we want to declare a global variable with this adapter. So private let int variable transactions view adapter. Okay, let's delete this. And now here we want to initialize it. Okay, and the only thing left here is to initialize our view model. Okay, let's create a function that initializes the view model. Init transaction activity view model. Here we will define the view model. Good. And now we need to trigger the view model observer. We need to make sure that the adapter is not null, and after we need to trigger the set updated data. Good. The last thing we need to do here is to trigger the API and this whole function to be called here when we on create. Good, we are done. Let's see if it works. Yep, looks good. We have just a little problem with the dates, but let's fix it now. Let's enter the XML file in order to fix this. Here, the created at text view should have a margin end also. So now this is fixed. And one thing that I noticed is that our currency is missing. So let's go in our adapter and here in our holder we should add our currency. Okay, now let's run again. Good, everything looks clean and nice, and this is how you implement this transaction list view. Going forward, we will talk about how to implement in-app purchases. Okay, so according to the Google documentation, in order to enable in-app purchases, the first thing you need to do is to set up a Google Play developer account. After that, you need to enable billing related features in the Google Play console. And the third step is to add the billing library dependency into your application. After you do that, you need to upload your app to Google Play in an internal test track. And after that, you will be able to configure and create your products. The products usually are one of the following types. There are one-time products, which can be consumable or non-consumable, and subscriptions. Today we will focus on the subscriptions. You need to know that subscriptions automatically renew until they are cancelled, and there are some states of a subscription. It can be active, cancelled, in grace period, on hold, paused, and expired. Also, you need to know that there are some sensitive data when you integrate the Google billing system. Every transaction has a purchase token that is a string that represents a buyer's entitlement to a product on Google Play, and an order ID that is also a string and represents a financial transaction. Okay, so one thing that you need to be aware is that a complex and complete implementation of in-app purchases system requires a server, and there are some rules. You need to move sensitive logic to your backend. You need to verify purchases before granting entitlements, and according to the best practices, you should keep the unlocked content outside your bundle, and you should use a real-time service to deliver your content, such as a content feed, or to use a remote server to deliver your content. And of course, you need to detect and handle voided purchases because there are some people that ask for a refund, or there are some people that don't pay their subscriptions anymore, and you should handle that on the server side. But today we will focus only on the implementation in the mobile app. So the first thing you need to do is to add the Google Play Billing Library dependency in your project in the graded file. After, you need to initialize a billing client object. You need to establish a connection to Google Play. You need to fetch the products and maybe to filter them. After that, you need to launch the purchase flow. And very important to handle it. It's very important to know that a subscription must be acknowledged. If you don't acknowledge that purchase, the user will be refunded. Good. Let's concentrate a bit on the implementation in our Android project. So as I said, in the Gradle file, we have the billing library, and in the manifest we gave permissions for billing. Now let's enter the transactions activity. Here we have Go Premium button, and we want, when a user clicks in on this button, the purchase flow to start. So let's start by declaring a billing client object. And now let's initialize it. Okay, so this activity needs to implement a listener called purchases updated listener. Here, in order to have a better visibility, we will rename the names of the two parameters in purchases and billing result. Now we will create a subscribe function. Okay, so inside this function, we will verify if the billing client is ready. If yes, we will make a new method initiate purchase. Else, we will try again to initialize the billing client. And now we will trigger the start connection method. We will passing an object of type billing client state listener. And here we need to override two functions. The first it's on billing setup finished, and the second one it's on billing service disconnected. Let's change the name of this parameter to billing result, and now implement this on billing setup finished method. So here we will verify if the response code is okay. If yes, then we will initiate the purchase. Else we will display a toast. Good, and if the service is disconnected, then we will also display an error message. Okay, now let's implement the initiate purchase function. Initiate. Okay, here we will define the SKU list, which is a mutable list of strings. And now we will add our parameter. Okay, so now basically want to pass in this function the product that we want. So in this case, we will want a subscription, and um, we will define the subscription a bit later in the Google console, but until then, let's say that our subscription has a name, and its name is premium sub. So at this SKU list, we will add this object premium subscription. Now we want to create a SKU details params object, so let's define it. And now we want to say to this object that we are looking for a product, and it's subscription. Okay, now we need to make sure that this feature is supported, so we will make a new variable billing result that it will trigger the is feature supported method. So in this way we will verify if the subscriptions are supported in the app. And now if the billing results response code it's okay, then we will trigger the queries queue details async method. But before that, if here we don't receive OK response code, then we should display text. Let's say subscription is not supported. Good. And now we will query for our product. So billing client dot queries queue detail async, and we will pass our parameters. Here we will pass the billing result and the SKU detail list. Okay, now we want to make sure that we have something in this response. So if SKU detail list is not null and it has at least one item, then we will want to launch the billing flow. But if it's not true, then we will want to toast a message. Let's say item not found. Here we forgot something. Before verifying the SKU detail list, we need to verify that the response is with the OK code. So we will have another if billing result that response code it's OK. Then do this. Else we will create another toast where we will present the error. Okay, and now here if we found our product, then we want to launch the billing flow. In order to do that, we need to pass a parameter with our product. So we will define a flow param that equals to billing flow param. That new builder. we pass the SKU details to our first product in the SKU details list, and build. And now let's launch the billing flow. Here we need to pass our activity, so it will be this at transactions activity, and we need to pass the flow params. Okay, so that's it with this part. Now let's implement the onPurchases updated method. So this method, it will be triggered when the launch billing flow it will be closed, and here we will have the result of the purchase. So we need to verify if the billing result has proper code, the OK code, and we need to make sure that the purchases array it's not null. So let's start doing this. If billing result response code equals to OK, billing client dot response code dot OK, and purchases array it's not null, then we will handle this purchase. As I said, a subscription needs to be acknowledged, else we will treat the other cases. But for this implementation, it's enough to toast an error message. Okay, and if the billing process is successful, then we need to handle the purchase. Here we will pass the purchases. And now we will create a function. And here we will iterate the purchases. So for purchase in purchases, we will verify if the purchase queue is of our type premium sub. Okay, and we will want to verify our purchase state, the purchase state of our purchase. We want to make sure that it's purchased. Okay, so this is if this condition is true, then we want to verify if the purchase wasn't already acknowledged. So if the purchase is not acknowledged, then we will want to acknowledge it. Okay, now we want to trigger the acknowledge purchase method from the billing client. So in order to do that, we need to create acknowledge purchase param object and to initialize it. Here we will pass the token of our purchase. And that's it. And now we will trigger the acknowledge method. Here we will need to pass the acknowledge params, and we will create a acknowledge purchase response listener. We need to make sure that the response code is okay. So if this will have the okay response code, then the we will grant to the user the access to our premium activity. So let's copy this bunch of code here. Good, that's it here. Now we will learn how to deploy this project to Google Play. So here is the Google Play console. I already pushed an APK with version 1.1. So in order things to work, now we need to deliver version code 3 and version name 1.2. We are syncing the Gradle. Okay, and now we will generate an APK for this project. Good. And now let's create a new release. We will upload the APK. And now we will start rollout to internal testing. Good, so this release is available to internal testers. For those who code side by side with me and want to see the purchase flow working on their emulators, at the end of this webinar, please send me an email and ask to be added in the testers list. And now we can go here at the subscriptions and to define our premium sub. So this will be the product ID. We need to fill this data, premium sub. We need to select the billing period. Let's make it yearly and a default price. So let's say 50 round. Good. Now it's defined and now we will activate it. Okay, so now let's run the project and see what we have done and if it's working. So we trigger the Go Premium button Here it's the Google Play billing flow, and if we hit subscribe, we subscribed, and now we were redirected to the premium activity. So that's it. Thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you have any related questions to this webinar, please do not hesitate to contact me. I wish you a great day and stay safe.